with my mother that, okay, hello everyone. I'm seeing the recording. Uh,
You just hit live. I know. You're live, Irene.
we are live.
You're live.
So, welcome everyone and to another talk. And we are speaking about happiness. What is happiness? I'm
Yes.
playing a new role. I'm out of my box. This was usually your role, John. Sorry for
Yeah.
that.
Go for it. This is wonderful.
Yes.
So, what is for you the definition of happiness?
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot. Um, I actually kind of went back in because, there's been a lot of studies around happiness, and there's a whole school of happiness at UPenn in the United States, right? And Martin Seligman has done a lot of work around happiness. And I think what came up for me in recognizing that, I think I think there's this perception that happiness is something that we either have or we don't have, and also that happiness has to be kind of somehow maintained. You're either happy and you're happy all the time, or you're not. And I think that, through kind of looking through through what people have said, it's been interesting because the reality, from what I've picked up and what I actually believe, is that happiness isn't always something that occurs each and every moment. It can come and it can go. And I think just having that awareness and recognizing that it does ebb and flow in our lives, and I think that's the first shift, I suppose. Because again, I think for me, I was kind of taught, like, be happy, right? Smile and be happy. And there's times when I'm not happy. There's times when I'm upset and I'm sad or I'm angry. But I think this idea of somehow we're always striving to be happy. There's always this kind of, this exercise of trying to get somewhere, and be happy, and have happiness always be there. And I think that, for me, is the misconception that happiness can come, and when it does show up, and I think we'll talk further about, can you create happiness and what is needed for happiness. But I think the biggest takeaway for me will be, to savor that happiness in that moment. We've talked a lot about being present, and I think that's one of the things around happiness, is to really recognize when it happens, but also know that it's not going to happen each and every time. It's not going to be this consistent thing in our lives. At least that's my perspective um, on happiness. And later on we can talk, because I was reflecting on what were those times that I was happy. And I think that'll be a conversation, that's something we can explore, because what were some of those things that happened that created that happiness in our lives. So anyway, so that's my kind of take on what I see happiness is and how it kind of functions in my world. So I'd be curious, Alice, we'll kind of go around, and then Irene, you can seal the deal.
Absolutely.
Well, when I saw the title, I thought, what can I say about happiness? It's I don't know. But then in that early morning in the hour when everything speaks to me, I came to the awareness that for me, happiness is a snapshot of joy. Is Happiness is dependent on the circumstances around it, while joy is interdependent and it just is. And it's that inner peace that we have within ourselves. Even when we're not happy, we can have joy. So that was the big thing for me when it was like, oh, there's like John was saying, sometimes we are happy, and sometimes I think we kind of destroy happiness because it feels so good. We try to hold so tightly to it. And by trying to hold so tightly to it, it makes it feel confined and it fades. So for me, that's happiness is that snapshot of joy, that inner peace. It comes and it goes, but you always have joy. You always have that inner peace. Just waiting for happiness to show up again. And it always does. That's my take on that.
Irene.
What can I say after you both? Well, more or less, I can second everything you have already said, and by myself, I can just say there is no such a thing as lack of anger or grief or sorrow. So when we sign up for life, I think that we included all these things. And it is now is a for a while that I see anything's not like something that is against me, but instead is an occasion of learning. And to me is this awareness, this recognition of learning, constant learning, is a taste of happiness, because it's uh, the proof that I am alive and I am feeling and I am learning, and I am open to receive life as it is. Because whenever we put that wrong resistance, because I think that there is a positive resistance, when there is something that we recognize that is against our values, or um, of the common sense. I don't know, when we see someone, I make an exaggeration, that be it an old person, weak person, we always see that there's something wrong there, but uh, despite this situation, we can really enjoy life, any single moment, by being present, by being there, by having learning. And even this extreme situation that we recognize as touching our values are moment of learning, because we say, what can we do in order that those things never happen again? And this is about the way that we can maintain what you call this peaceful state, Alice, this calmness, um, this capacity to observe life as it is.
So I'm curious if you were both to think back in those moments where you were happy, what were the circumstances, or what was happening in that moment, that created happiness or allowed you to experience that joy? I'm just curious if you might be able to reflect on what situation happened when you experienced happiness.
The exchange of love.
Yeah.
That was the highest level of happiness for myself. And it was when my teacher gave me friendships or some advice, and I was able to felt this unconditional love that she spread out everywhere, and everything she touched is love. And so she's, um, an example for myself. So how can I feel? How can I make people feel like she make me feel loved without any possible condition? And when I exchange love with my nephews, with my mom, with my sister, with you, I know you smiled, so that make you feel happy, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think for me, um, if I thought back one circumstance would be when I was a little girl, maybe about 5 or 6, my favorite person in the whole world was my grandfather. And on Friday evening, there was this big field between our house and my grandfather's house. And in halfway between that field, there was an old house. And as kids, we called it the ghost house. So it was my oldest brother's job every Friday to walk me from our house to my grandfather's house because I would spend the weekend with him. And when I think back now on those memories, my brother never walked me the whole way that he was supposed to. He would only take me halfway to the ghost house and he would run back. So I would have to run and run and run to my grandfather's. But I think of the things that my grandfather and I would do on the weekend. He couldn't cook, but he had what was back then called a percolator, which you put the grinds in and it made the coffee and you would see it jump up in the little thing. And for breakfast, there was a candy bar called a Baby Ruth. And at that time, it was like about 3 times as big as it is now. But for breakfast, my grandfather and I would have Baby Ruth candy bars and coffee. And when I think of that, it makes me so happy and it transport me back to that time. And we would, after breakfast, we would go out to the barn and we would feed the animals. And I mean, just all the memories I have of the things that happened in the barn. Yeah, we had a small pony called a Shetland pony that I would ride back and forth. And I mean, that's one of the circumstances that made me happy when my children were born. And I looked at them for the first time, and I saw their fingers so tiny and, they were so tiny. That made me happy. And just when I simply take a walk in the woods and I can listen and see nature, I'm happy. You know, it's it's just such a nice, calming feeling, and I'm happy. So it's things like that. But I never try to, well, now that I'm an adult and I'm hopefully more mature and wiser, I never try to hold so tightly to that moment of happiness that I um, maybe smother it.
Mhm.
I just try to be in that moment. And those are the things that make me happy, you know. It's like I see happiness as, you know, it's not the whole book. It's a chapter in the book. It's not the whole journey. It's a path on the journey. And, you know, if I look at it that way and don't try to make it my whole book, just what it is, just enjoy that chapter, just enjoy that path, and expect that another chapter is going to come and it's going to be just as good. Another path is going to come and it'll be just as adventurous. So
Mhm.
that's how those are the things that make me happy and my attitude towards happiness.
That's wonderful. I appreciate both of your sharing. I think, what's coming up for me is it seems as though, and even as I think about my own situation, the main theme here is around connection, particularly connecting with others. And I know that for me, that's when I've really experienced true happiness. Um, and in through my readings and my studying, around positive psychology and all of this, that's one of the critical factors that they talk about in terms of
Mhm.
experiencing happiness, is to connect with others. I think the other thing for me, and it's something that people have researched happiness, is this idea of also when we give to others, when we're giving of ourselves in some way. And that's where you as the giver experience happiness, but also the recipient can experience happiness. I mean, Irene, that was the experience with the teacher, right? She was giving, or he was giving you this love, and one would have to wonder that by that giving, that probably allowed them to experience happiness for
Mhm.
themselves as well as you. And for Alice, that connection between you and your grandfather, and those moments. So that idea of connection, but also the idea of giving,
Yeah.
um, is so, I think, critical. But I think the other, and I loved how you said, Alice, this idea that it's just a chapter in the book, right? And that it
Mhm.
changes. And that's really kind of connecting with what I started with in this ebb and
Mhm.
flow. And to bring it into something more concrete like a book was lovely, because I could say, yeah, this is like a chapter. And the next chapter might be something else. And then the following could be the happiness
Yeah.
chapter again. So I think, again, this idea of not being attached to it, but knowing that it's there and it will happen. And I think the key, and I wonder if the key really is to also be very present in knowing when it is happening, that it's that moment of embracing it maybe in some way, and kind of also allowing it to go, but recognizing that it's there. Because I can think of many times when I probably didn't allow myself to be really, really
Mhm.
happy, because I wasn't really making myself aware of that moment. I was distracted, or I was thinking about something else. So, so I think that was what was coming up for me too, is this idea of attachment, this
Mhm.
pursuit, and then if we have it, to just want to hold on to it forever, and recognizing that it's going to ebb and flow. It's going to be a new chapter in the book.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
You know, John, something you just said reminded me of something someone told me one time when you were saying how when you give happiness and, you know, that's when you give, that's a part of happiness.
Mm.
I remember I had a friend one time and he would always, anytime he would want to do something for me, I would say, "Oh no, it's okay. Oh no, I'm good. Oh no." And he asked me, he said, "How do you feel? You are always giving to others. How does that make you feel?" And I said, "It makes me happy. I love giving to others." He said, and he asked me, "Well, then, if you love that so, why do you deny that feeling from everyone that tried to give to you?" And that was a really big eye opener for me. And I also realized that that's what I do. You know, I want to give, but it's hard for me to receive. And we have to open ourselves up to receive that happiness and not deny others the opportunity to be happy by giving and sharing with us.
Irene, what are
I
your
was
thoughts?
Yes, I was wondering that all of us feel happy when there is this balance of giving and receiving, because receiving can also allow the other people to give to us,
Yes.
and the openness is the key, I think, for a complete and balanced happiness that is about giving and receiving love in the same way. We allow this wave to be infinite and pervade everything, this wave of love, because whatever we give and we receive is about love. So when we coach people, what we give to our clients is our love in a way or another, because any relationship, any situation is unique. And I think this is why we love so much this profession, because any connection, any situation is always unique. And there is always learning. Um, on the other hand, is this, seeing another person laugh or being happy also make us happy.
Yeah.
So at least, you know, I think I'm feeling another, side of my happiness is when I see my clients laugh, or having an insight or an aha moment that can shift completely, can be a shift to transform the life and get better and better. This is something that really make me feel this sacred sense of service that many of us have. And I think we are all here to grow together. And whenever we can do it in a way or another, there is this um, happiness going on. And it shouldn't be always in place, but it's this presence that you always recall, John, is to recognize the importance of the moment, that when we are living that moment, the here and now. That can have many, many, many nuances. I think life would be very boring if we have just one emotion.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
But we can have an incredible, range of nuances of even happiness. It's not always the same. It's not
Right.
always with the same situation. It's not always with the same people. Mm, and this is what make life so fascinating, and we so happy to live. So
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I have another question before you start, Alice.
Mhm.
That is about was inspired by John reflections. Are we always aware when we are happy?
Yeah.
John.
It's- for me, I don't think that I am. This conversation and this topic has made me really think about being more aware. I mean, also, I think this idea of this energy that flows in between, it's this infinite kind of, this kind of cycle, right, of back and forth. And although we don't have a lot of time for this area, I mean, one of the things that came up for me in thinking about this, actually, there were two things as you were speaking. The one is, like for me to think about the range of emotions that I may experience, and to think about how often can I recognize this happiness space. Am I in this happiness space more often than I am in anger or anxiety or whatever? To kind of even have that moment to really gauge how much am I experiencing happiness? How much am I actually allowing myself in these moments to choose maybe a different emotion, when the reality is that happiness is there. It's for me to take and for me to experience. And I often wonder with happiness how much this idea of receiving, and this idea of am I worthy of receiving that happiness? This idea around worthiness, am I worthy enough to be able to have happiness? Um, that's a whole maybe another topic, but that maybe going into this idea is as we think about happiness in our lives and think about being present in those moments, what does come up, especially in those moments where we can receive, what happens? What are our thoughts around that? What makes someone say, no, thank you? Because I was with Alice. I do that a lot. I'm good. Thanks. Thanks. And now I don't have the answer, but now I'm going to ask myself, what's that about? What is that about? And like I said, I don't have the answer, but I think that's the critical piece in order for it to really flow, and what happiness is really about. It is about giving and receiving. But now I'm going to ask myself the question, how present am I? And when I deflect that
Mhm.
opportunity to receive, what's that about? Because in some way, I'm giving up that opportunity to experience happiness, especially when I'm getting it from another person. So that was kind of a very expansive answer to your question, Irene, but it really brought up kind of, like being present, and also this idea of worthiness.
Mhm.
Because I know a lot of people who don't feel that they're worthy of having
Mhm.
happiness because of certain situations. But again, that's something to contemplate, I suppose. You know,
Maybe could be another topic for another discussion,
could be,
Yes, yes.
could be.
Uh, yeah.
because only these. Yes, Alice.
I think also we have like some different levels of happiness. The walk in the woods that I was talking about, that's one level. It's kind of like a quiet level. Um, the something funny that I can think about. I remember one time my sister, the one that just passed, and we were in Chicago, and I don't even remember what it was, but something happened during the day. And that night, when we were talking about it, we started laughing. And we were at my niece's house, and we were in the basement room, and we were laughing so hard. And I couldn't stop laughing. And we were laughing so hard that my niece and her husband come down to the basement and said, "What are y'all laughing about?" And we couldn't tell them, and they start laughing. And I mean, that was like a whole different level of happiness. But when I think about it, that's such a good memory. And I can't even remember why we were laughing, but we were laughing so hard and we couldn't stop. All four of us in just laughing, laughing. So I think sometimes, there's different levels of happiness. Sometimes we might be happy, but because we're not laughing so loudly, rolling on the floor, we might think, okay, we're not happy. But we are happy. It's just a different level of happiness.
So Irene,
Yes.
wrap this in a bow, Irene. You're gonna wrap this in a bow.
A pretty bow.
A pretty bow. A happy bow.
Well, for my perspective, we have touched many, many shades of happiness in our discussion, and I think we can go forward for many hours. But what stood out to me is that we, as human beings, quite often we don't recognize the moments of the happiness, and how many nuances can we have in our way of experiencing happiness. And to whoever is watching this video or listening to us, I will ask you how many times you didn't recognize moment of happiness or joy. Or another question could be how many times you were experienced the sharing of love that make you feel your heart beat even faster. Or what are the signal for you of happiness, because all of us share different way when we experience happiness. And I think Kelly's just shared how many different level of happiness we could experience. And another question that came up from you, Joan: are we worthy? And how much our culture or religious background or um, even tribe background, we all have tribes, families,
Mhm.
condition this way of thinking. And in that moment when you talk, John say, is that humanity still asking if we are worthy of happiness? And it's wow, I said maybe we can, as coach, have more impact in that. So how, as coaches, we can help people to recognize happiness and spread this energy everywhere? That's how I wrapped up.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah. So maybe this is to be continued, and also maybe the question is it some, are there ways to some people have said it's a skill that you can actually learn how to create happiness. And so maybe that's a further extension of the conversation as well, you know. But right now, how much are we aware, and how much do we know and experience it when it's happening before us? Um, so maybe that makes a big difference and a change in people who are watching this, to go, maybe I need to, maybe I'll think about really being more present and aware when this actually is happening. So thank you all. Yeah.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Irene.
Thank you.
Now we will wait for the
We will wait for the happy bell to just whisk us away.